Welcome to the world of some edibles, where there's a variety of CBD and THC delights. Whether it's cookies, brownies, or rice cereal bars, Some Edibles has what you're looking for. Milligrams of CBD and THC on the label will help you discover your magical number. Not too little and not too much, just right. Order at someedibles.com and use coupon code DRUNKEN for 10% off your order. That's coupon code DRUNKEN for 10% off your order at someedibles.com. Hey everybody, welcome to Drunken Housewife Reviews. I am Sarah, the Drunken Housewife.
And I'm her husband slash host, Ian, who tries to keep her on the rails best I can.
And that's a full-time job. Today, we have Richard Aviles. Did I pronounce that correctly? Did I do it right?
That is correct.
Yay! All right. Some people may know him from the Rico podcast. What a lot of people don't know, and what we're really wanting to talk to him about today, is the course that you teach on human trafficking. What it is, what to look for, what to do, all of that. And that is, to me, like a very important topic. Because I know we just had the Indianapolis 500 here in Indiana, and people tend to associate, oh, big event, we need to look out for human trafficking, but it's something that happens every single day. And so we wanted to bring you on to give you a chance to talk about what your course is, how you got into it, all of that.
So, first of all, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. Not a lot of people want to listen to me talk about basically not even the courses, how I got to create the course.
Yes.
For most people that don't know me, I've been working as a Spanish translator and interpreter for a long time. I started out in high school. I used to just charge my homies to like translate magazines and stuff like that and do their English homework. And then that obviously over the years turned into like some more serious stuff. So what ended up happening was in 2017, when I started my business, Aviles Translations, I didn't get any business for about like 6 months, I think. And then one day I got a call from the courts, and I ended up getting read into what was then a human trafficking case. And they had these kids, and they had a bunch of cases, and it was always kids. They had these kids that the parents were either trying to sell them or prostitute them or profit off of them in some way, shape, or form. So that was pretty much like my first encounter with that. And then as the years went by, I kind of like developed a name for myself for being able to handle those cases, because the work of an interpreter is to stay neutral and to give you exactly what's happening, to the best of my ability. So a lot of people would get emotional in court, or they would break down, or we had one person had a mental breakdown and start puking when they were interpreting. So it's not as easy mentally as most people would think, but there's ways to do it. But over the course of that time, I learned a lot, and then I ended up developing a course with in partnership with Trans Interpreting, and now that course is out for the public and whatnot for everybody to get.
Yes, and you sent me basically, your whole course, and
I sent you the slides.
Yeah, and things that I guess I didn't even think still happened. Of course, there's the sex trafficking, and you have the organ, trafficking, servitude. I did not know that was something that was still happening. I mean, way back in the day, you heard about indentured servants, people who owed people money and were forced to work for these people to pay off their debt. It's still going on.
So
to a degree, I mean,
to a degree, it's going on, right? So what you have is, and I'll use examples that I myself have either translated or I've dealt with as an interpreter, right? So there are people who what they'll do is they'll help someone out, and through coercion, violence, or force, they'll basically try to get someone to do involuntary servitude, debt bondage, slavery, or they'll want like a commercial sex act from them, right? So all those things, what that basically breaks down to is laborer services and commercial sex acts. That's basically what it is. And unfortunately, that does happen in this day and time. There's still people who I had a case years ago where I was the interpreter, where they were keeping this woman who was a babysitter from another country, a Spanish speaking country, and they were keeping her visa held hostage, basically in
Okay.
exchange for her to like sleep with other people and for them to exploit her.
Oh my God.
So these are things that unfortunately like still happen, and people just don't really understand the complexity of it
Mm-hmm.
and how in your face it is. I mean, you have a most recent example of Jeffrey Epstein, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we see examples of things like that happen. The problem is a lot of people just don't believe that it's a thing, and a lot of people take it as it's just a Hollywood thing, which it really isn't. It happens everywhere, more than what you think. Within 10 miles of you,
Okay.
you could probably find someone being forced into a commercial sex act or being forced for labor. Within 10 miles of any zip code, you could.
Which is
Like
scary to think about.
Yeah.
Really scary to think
it's
about.
scary. It's scary to think about, but the problem is that people don't really take that seriously, and like that's the problem. We
Mhm.
have we have an organization that deals with tobacco, alcohol, and firearms. We have another one that deals with domestic terrorism. We have another one that deals with the borders, another one that deals with the waters, and another one that deals with international. But we don't have one that addresses directly human trafficking. HSI has a branch that works human trafficking cases, though, but I don't believe
Yeah.
their budget is as big as it should need to be.
So
Gotcha.
that's why, like, we as the public really kind of need to be more informed
Yeah, and like
as
Definitely.
to.
it's not even informed. It's just I mean, informed is a way I would put it, but I would say just be aware, right? Because if
Yeah.
I told you, if I sat here and told you all these things, like it's overwhelming. It's like really, really overwhelming to dump that on somebody. So
Yeah.
like what I always tell people is that just be aware of your surroundings, be aware of your neighbors, like if someone's a little too close to you, like just be aware of it. If you see
Gotcha.
something that doesn't look right, right? Like say
Mm-hmm.
something. And normally I tell people like give a description, like color of shirt, design on the shirt, hair, long, short, curly, in a bun, down,
Mm-hmm.
pigtails, eye color if you can see a complexion and what the other person was wearing. If you see something that's out of whack, right? And it's
Yeah.
also it teaches you situational awareness in essence, because you like tend to pick up like certain things. You just got to be careful because you can get very negative, and then that's how some people become paranoid.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I totally understand that.
Well, something related to that is my day job is a flight attendant, and we do get some human
Mm,
trafficking awareness training in that. And yeah, things can go wrong, and people just get too paranoid about it and whatnot. It definitely is a balance to just to keep aware.
yeah, and
Yeah.
like you're one of like the top 5 people that are probably going to run into it, right? Like you have
Hmm.
you have obviously law enforcement, but you have the flight attendants, you have truckers, right? Which you have Truckers Against Trafficking. That's an organization. But I think where people fail to see is hotels, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
recently there was a girl that
Gotcha.
was picked up in Texas for trafficking. They found her in St. Louis, Missouri. So like
Okay.
hotel staff should be like the number one. Who I'd love to train hotel staff and do like a
Mm-hmm.
conference and stuff with the little bit that I know. Um, and
Mhm.
the other people are restaurants, like waiters and waitresses and stuff like that. Like they're gonna be the people. And then the third one, believe it or not, barbers and hairstylists,
Yes.
I could
like
see
nail
that.
place and stuff like that. Yeah. So those
Yeah.
are the
Yes.
4 main ones that you'll see. Once it gets past to flights and stuff like that, and you see that person is probably a little bit too accustomed to doing that, and also probably is
Gotcha.
up in the chain. You know what I'm saying? Not that you
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't
Sure,
be
sure, sure.
aware, you absolutely should. But that's just like normally, like from my experience. And the thing is that everybody needs to be aware of it. And it's so difficult too, because people are also scared of like interactions. And a lot of times, in my experience, traffickers would utilize that ignorance where people just, everybody's in their own little world. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm saying? Everybody's in their own little
Yeah.
world, their own thing. People aren't paying attention to each other. So that's one thing that traffickers utilize a lot. So
Yeah.
it's important to be able to understand that.
And I know, like, especially women with my haircut, let's just be honest, I have a Karen cut. Um,
A Karen
might be
cut.
afraid to to a Karen haircut.
Okay.
But I mean, they might be afraid to be wrong, to be looking at a situation and think, you know, is that a human trafficking situation? Is it not? If I'm wrong, then I'm going to look like
Like an
a
idiot.
nosy Karen.
I
And
think that's more of a societal issue, because
exactly.
if people, because I could understand someone seem a little too overzealous, right? I can
Mm-hmm.
understand that. But here's the thing is everybody has an instinct, whether it's good or bad. We can that's a whole nother conversation, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is at the expense of looking stupid, you can just observe and continue to observe and just take a mental note. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you have to report everything, right? And
Yeah.
I want to be very cautious of what I'm saying here, because a lot of people take this out of context. Is just because not every single time that something looks like a duck is a duck. But if it looks like a duck, if it moves like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, then by God, quack.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
a lot of times it's important to understand that you could be wrong. That is something that could happen. But
Yeah.
I think at the same time, law enforcement should have way more training than the average person in order to be able to make a decision, whether that's the right one or a wrong one, which unfortunately it happens, to be able to go nay or shay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the Karen, as you call it, which it took me a second to like identify that term or whatever, then I would like to believe where we could live in a world where eventually that person goes, hey, I'm so sorry. This is why I said that. Da, da, da. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
this is why I learned this, even if it was
Yeah.
incorrectly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we live in a society that's so sue happy that everybody's terrified. And that's one of the things that traffickers also count on.
Yeah. And I
It's
mean,
just the nature
yeah,
of the world.
from my
Yeah.
viewpoint, I'd rather be wrong and say something to somebody than to be right and be quiet. You know what I mean? It's like if I'm in an airport and I'm looking at a situation, I would much rather go up to the gate agent and go, look, this is setting off my spidey senses. I think there's something wrong with this situation, and be wrong, and it just be like a father and daughter situation, than, you know, to be right and keep my mouth shut and then read 2 weeks later that they found that kid dead on a highway. you know
Well,
it's just my viewpoint.
unfortunately, in most of the cases that I work, they don't end up dead. They end up in another place, in another country, being used. Once you
Yeah.
talk about like organ trafficking is something that happens. Unfortunately, like I say in my class, it's not something I've ever encountered. I know it's a thing. I'm aware of it. I mean, there's information about it, but it's not something that I unfortunately have any experience on. What scares the
Okay.
shit out of me is child soldiers is what scares me, because
That was
that's
the
a
other thing I was going to bring
Oh,
up.
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing that scares the shit out of me more than anything. Because you have to understand that war changes you. War
Yeah.
changes you dramatically. So you take
Yeah.
a kid that doesn't really have the support and the backing and the love that they would need, and you put them in an environment for grown men, that changes them and it completely alters the way that their brain is. So that's
Yeah.
something that
Yes.
unfortunately still happens. So that's one of the things that to me is like eerily terrifying, that that's even a thing. So yeah, it's just one of those things that people don't really consider or really sit down and think about. And again, that's not happening as predominantly as we think in this country. But when we look at other countries, it's happening openly. So
Yeah.
it's wild to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. And I know I'm constantly reading online, or in posts on, Facebook and stuff like that. Somebody like, I was at Walmart and this guy kept following me through the aisles and I just didn't know what to do. And I'm like, then you turn around and say, can I help you? Or you take, you have this, take a picture of them and be like,
Or immediately talk to a
go,
Walmart employee,
yeah.
just
And
that way it's just,
I mean,
that
are
can
these
deter
things
as
that you would
well. Sure.
recommend? Like somebody's following you through
Here's the
Walmart
thing.
or Target?
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
I can't really tell you what to do or what not to do because it's gonna vary in a couple things, right?
Yes.
Number
Yes.
one, it's gonna vary on your availability to defend yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I have someone trying to traffic me at Walmart, I think that's the worst place for you to do it because there's sharp things everywhere on Walmart.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that's
I
true.
don't know about you, but if my life was in danger and someone tries to take me against my will, I'm probably going to grab anything that I can to defend myself because I don't know what their intentions are. And since you're
Yes.
taking me away without saying anything, I'm going to assume that it's the worst. So therefore, I'm going to defend myself to the best of my ability.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's things that you can do, like have situational awareness. You can pull up your phone and whatnot. Also, the other thing is stay in a well-lit area where there's people, go into the bathroom. That's another thing you can do. And again, when you're talking about someone following you, there's things that you can do, like little things. If it's in a car, it's a completely different scenario than when it's in person. When it's in person, normally it's nice to be aware of your surroundings. Just how many times has this person turned the same way that I have? If it's been a few times, then maybe I go another route and see if they follow me. So to me, it's like a million things that you can do. For me personally, Missouri is a stand your ground castle doctrine. So I would
Okay.
tell anybody to check with an attorney what the self-defense rules are, and I would review a plan with an attorney, which I personally have, based upon where you're at. But if you're in a situation where someone's trying to take you, be as loud as you can, shout descriptions of them, which you see that in the movie Taken,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually one of the things is like this person with this hair color is trying to take me against my will. I don't know who they are. But at the same time, you can run into a situation like it happened years ago. There was a woman that a man came over to take her into the car and she's saying he's trying to kidnap me. And the dude ended up getting shot. Turned out that was his wife and she was schizophrenic. So like that's why I tell people
Oh,
like you have to be real careful with the situations that you run into
Yeah.
because you have to be careful of how you interact with these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing also is you also have to be aware that you're not going to be able to save the whole world, but you can save your own community, which is a thing that I tell people a lot. Because when you're in your own area, right? Like I know all the cars that are normally in my neighborhood. Why? Because I like my neighborhood. I spend a lot of time outside reading and I just know everything that happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know that if I go, to certain places, I know the average people that I'm going to see because I pay attention. I
Sure.
know that if I take a route and, I have someone following me after so many times and I know, what to do. But that's Richard. What I recommend everybody doing is just have a little bit of situational awareness. I would recommend anybody to take some form of self-defense classes, whether it's boxing,
yeah.
Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, judo, in order for you to be able to at least have a second, because when we're talking about stressful situations like that, we're trying to buy seconds. A fight happens in increments of seconds, right? And each second is going to determine where something's going to go, right? If the person is fighting and I keep my hands up and they lower theirs, and I can hit the face. If they jump up, that I hit the stomach. If they're throwing an overhook, that I can like. There's different ways that each second is going to change. So it's the same in a stressful situation. The thing is we don't think about this, and then you deal with what I always like to say. It's like the three stresses that you have: the stress of the shock and the stress of it happening, the shock and the stress of, oh my God, this is really happening, right? And then
Yeah.
the
Mm-hmm.
shock of like, what do I do? And then that's when you people have all these things, they start to get hyperventilate and stuff like that. So it's like
Yeah.
things like that that you
Yeah.
you should be able to like have a conversation. And you know, it's difficult because in today's society, no one wants to think about it. But again, it's never been more predominant with like the Jeffrey Epstein example that things
Mm.
like this are happening. And it's
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I know, like, as a parent, um, the fact that we have in our homes phones, computers, laptops, gaming systems, 100 different ways for predators to find your kids,
Mhm.
for somebody to, connect with your child and lull them into that sense of security and all of that. Um, as I mean, what would be your tips to parents? Because I know, like, with our daughter, no accepting friend requests until I've looked it over and you can tell me, how do you know this person? No messaging with anybody that you don't know, no, this, that, or the other. But we have a special circumstance because our daughter is autistic. So she's, we have that,
So what I always tell
circumstance.
people, what I always tell people is there's a million things that you could do, right? Obviously, vetoing people is a good way. The best advice that I've gotten was from this federal agent that I talked to, that we went to a bar together after a case. And he's like the best thing that I did with my kids, because he used to work trafficking cases. He's like, I explained to them that there's good people and there's bad people. And a good person will not pass certain boundaries, right? A bad person will try to break those boundaries even when you try to put them up. So me
Mhm.
personally, what I try to do with my kid is like, if a stranger asks you, how are you doing, and you're around me, right? It's okay to answer, you know. If a stranger asks your name and I'm around me, and you're around me, or you're around your mom, you're around, certain people, like it's okay to answer. Understand that it's not okay when someone asks XYZ things, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you're explaining boundaries, and you also explain, you also explain, like, picture analysis is another thing. Like, you see someone who only takes pictures from up here, that means that normally they could be always on the go, right? They're just always doing this. That means they only take pictures on their phone. If you see someone that has, like, there's a million things that you can do. Like, they're always flashing money, or they're always trying to do things that seem a little obnoxious, then just be aware of that. But it's more
Yeah.
about not even putting fear, right? Because I don't want, at least for me, I don't want my kid to be fearful. I just want her to
Yeah.
understand, like, this is the world. Like, if you notice, I don't get over emotional, because unfortunately this is the reality. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
I can't cover the sun with a thumb, but what I can do is try to educate people, like, man, like, maybe don't tell everybody on the internet your business. Be very savvy with how you complain about certain things. And don't get me wrong, the internet is a great resource to try to, like, if you have a problem that you've addressed every way possible legally and you can't, then yeah, I think the internet has shown that it can help people in important and impactful ways. But it's also need to understand that, hey, this is what these people are probably going to look like. Are they asking you for pictures? Are they asking you for this? Obviously, when you have a son with special needs, or a daughter with special needs, or a kid with special needs, or a child with special needs, it's something completely different there, right? So at that
Mhm.
point, I
Yeah.
would say more like, I would talk with a professional better than anything, because I myself, I don't talk about things that I've never experienced or I don't know how to deal with. So there's obviously exigent circumstances with a special need child, but at the same time, a child, I've always said, man, I've interpreted for autistic children, and I've seen how they interact with their parents, and it's a completely different interaction. Like, it's like, oh wow, like when it's just the parent and the child, it's very, they understand each other a little better. So to me, it's
Mhm.
about educating as to what to look for, right? And being aware of what's out there.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to have, unfortunately, people that do heinous things. It's just a matter of being intelligent enough to catch it and say, nah, not me, motherfucker. Like, that's how I look at it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I know, I'm addicted to TikTok. Admitting you have a problem is a step in recovery, but I'm never going to recover. Um, and one of the things that I constantly see are people showing situations with that hand signal. Have you seen where you tuck the thumb and then do like that?
I've
Is
seen
is
I've seen
is
something I've seen something like that. I know what you're talking about. Again,
Yeah,
in my experience, I'll tell you this. The first case I ever got, it was a church who called me and they put this girl on the phone because they found me online. And the first thing
Okay.
the girl said in Spanish was, "I'm being trafficked, help me." Like that's the experiences that I've had. I've never
yeah,
had an experience where someone made a code or an approach. I do have a friend who recently was able to help someone. He works in a hotel, and this young girl approached him and said, "I'm being trafficked, help me." And the cops got involved, but the guys got away. And the girl
Okay.
had
yeah.
been in the lost and founds and stuff like that, and she ended up going home. She'd been lost for a while. So it's really important to understand that there are like these hand signals that people do. I personally have never seen them. Just like we hear that there are these tags that traffickers leave and stuff like that. I've never seen that, so I can't attest
I
to its
I
legitimacy or
would,
not.
yeah, I wouldn't think that they would if they
But
were
what
like
I
smart
can
at all. But yeah.
well, what I can tell you is this is every trafficker that I've ever sat across and I translated for, the number one thing that they did, and only like two of them ever admitted it out of a lot of them that I sat and translated for, is that they try to keep a low profile. It's normally kept within like a small circle, and normally it's kept within like their own social group and stuff like that, right? And we look again
Hmm.
like the
Yeah.
example of Epstein. He had his own inner circle, he had his own place and stuff like that. So when you look at that, we can infer also that they want to try to keep a certain amount of low profile, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are things to understand. And the other thing is also is that all of these things go hand in hand with, drugs and all these other things. So it's important to understand like why I said in the beginning, I said, look at your community, because if you know thy neighbor, then not to sound religious, but if you know your neighbors, like you can kind of like start to build an awareness. And you never know
Yeah.
too. You could have a neighbor that's there for 10 years and they've been selling, kids out of their basement that you didn't know. You know what I'm
Oh yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I was
But
say, because
at
we've
least,
lived
yeah.
here for 8 years and we just had the FBI raid a house
Like three
like
blocks
like
away.
3 or 4 blocks away from us.
Yeah.
And
And nobody knows what's going on yet. But if
we
the FBI is involved, we're like, well, something weird's
yeah,
going
that's
on.
that's big boy stuff.
So yeah.
And but it my awareness of it happened because of a car that looked shady, driving really slow down the street and sitting at, because we're right at a stop sign, and
Hmm.
sat there for the longest time. And I'm like, and I was talking to the guy that mows our lawn. I'm like, this is freaking me out. And he's like, yeah, this is freaking me out too. And then the car pulled away. And like 5 minutes later, another neighbor's like, yeah, the FBI is raiding this house down over. And I'm like, ew, what? you know? So yeah, you can live somewhere for 9, years and
And not know.
not
Just you
know.
don't know
Yeah.
what's
We
going
still have no
on.
idea
You
what was
don't know.
going on at that house.
Yeah. I used to live at a spot that I don't want to name, that across from us was a meth lab. Like I knew it was. Like I could,
Mm-hmm.
not that I knew, right? Because I never went in there to buy, but it's like you have aluminum on the windows, you stay up late at night and like different cars drive by.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You're always like up late at night in the hour. Sometimes I see you up early in the morning, and then the door has like a bunch of bolts and stuff when you ride by. You have two really big dogs outside that just don't look at anybody nicely. Like there's a million things that you could do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But the thing is that at the end of the day, it's like, well, what do you do? Like what do you do? Some
Yeah.
people don't really
Yeah.
know. Some people are just like, oh, those darn kids. It's like you never really know. So that's why it's important I tell people like that's where law enforcement, uh would need to like intervene, or something would need to happen, or hey, maybe it's a cult too. Like you just never know. So
Yeah.
it's a million things. You could be dealing with someone who's a paranoid schizophrenic too. You know what I'm saying? Like these are
Oh
all
Yeah.
yeah.
things that happen. But unfortunately, a lot of times it's the least common denominator. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's important to like look around and know your neighbor. It's like
Yeah.
really
Sure.
important.
Yeah. Um, I'm trying to think, because like this is such an overwhelming topic,
Well, it's not something you think about a
and
lot, and he obviously that's what he does.
yeah,
So
this is what
it's
you do,
kind
and
of
this is
a
why I
yeah.
wanted you on, because like I said, we constantly, the month of May, the first thing we hear is look out for, these signs of this of human trafficking. And I'm like, but what about the other 11 months of the year? This isn't
Well,
something that just
that's
happens in the month of May here. You know
well,
what I
that's
mean?
that's the thing is that the reason why they do that is probably for a few reasons. Number one, it could be that they're getting some information from local law enforcement that says, listen, in the past X amount of years, this has been the number one crime that happens during this time frame, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because data, as we know, the government doesn't move fast with data, right? So like a lot of times what I tell people is to, like, first of all, understand like what the elements of human trafficking is, right? And like
Yeah.
that looks like action means purpose equals human trafficking, right? The action of recruiting, harboring, providing, transporting, patronizing, advertising, soliciting by forceful fraud, coercion, violence, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order to get for the purpose of a commercial sex act, labor, services, slavery, debt, bondage, involuntary servitude. Insert these variables equals human trafficking, right?
Yes.
So a lot of times when it's a minor, all of this gets thrown out. And if you put them in any one of those scenarios, sometimes, right, because I'm not a lawyer, it could go to like human trafficking. And a lot of times I've seen in court, they give them lesser charges because they gave information for something like this is something that everybody knows that it happens.
Yeah.
They give something or they know something and they want to work a deal, whatever it may be, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
like the first thing that you need to understand, because a lot of people don't understand that also there's already laws in place that require presidential attention and stuff like that, right? Like the TVPA, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
this basically like it defines like what human trafficking is under federal law for the United States and stuff like that. But the problem is that I could sit here and break this all, but like people don't really understand that it's like this is something that happens a lot more than what you think. And it happens in the suburbs, it's happened in small towns. Yeah, the commercial sex act happened in major cities with connecting highways, but that happens
Okay.
normally because it's different avenues of exits that they have, right? And at
Yeah.
that point,
Sure.
you're looking at transporting and harboring when you see things like that, right? Like there's websites that you go, and again, not everybody who engages in commercial sex acts or in prostitution or however whatever word you want to utilize to define that is necessarily
Yeah.
being. I've been in cases where the cops would call me and I'd go interpret and they're like, no, 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 like I just do this to make money. I have no one that is, I have no tattoos. Like I've had chances like that where I had to interpret and I overheard, I had to interpret this and it's like, no, no, I'm just doing
Hmm.
this because I can't find any other way to make money and da 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 da. And the cops are like, oh, well, this isn't what we thought it was. You know, move on. Here's some help that you can get, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's one thing to understand. The other thing is always be wary of like who you let in your home and how you let them in your home and stuff like that, because there's been instances where uh people have poised to play government entities and all this other stuff, and then things get a little out of hand. So like you have to be real careful like who you trust too, right? And
Sure.
the other
Hmm.
thing is to understand that a lot of this has to do with money. It's all money. That's the way that they look at it.
Yeah.
That's literally the way they look at it. And they're all connected hand in hand. Like if you look at the class that I sent you, there's a part that I talk about the drug emoji, which the drug
Yes. That's,
emoji,
yeah, I was going
yeah,
to talk to you about that next. Yeah.
yeah. So the drug emoji, it's thanks to the Drug Enforcement Administration. They have like this really cool website which has a lot of open source information that people don't really respect. And one of the cool things about the DEA is they constantly are always providing really good information. But then there's other things that people don't know about, like a rose is normally representative in sex trafficking with $100 bills. Uh,
Oh.
uh, what was the other one? A small heart and a big heart is normally representing that could mean that they're a minor. Two crowns could mean that they're either controlled by two people or that they're trying to get away. There's like four different things. Everything's gonna have a meaning depending on the context that you give it, right?
Yeah.
So I tell
Yeah.
Gotcha.
everybody like this is gonna depend on different things, right? Uh what was the other one? Cherries normally means that it's a minor. When it's an eggplant, it's normally trying to refer that they're of the other gender, right? Or that
Sure.
they have that genital. Uh, pills normally you'll see like you'll see one that has maybe like a chocolate bar, a snowflake, and a pill, right? So normally it's like advertising. That could also mean that they're either cool with those things or that they have those things to sell. So like these are
Gotcha.
all things that you'll see. Different colored shapes could mean different things. It could mean anything from STDs to the type of drugs that they utilize. So these are all little things that if you ever sit down and you look at it and you have the slides, which you can share with everybody.
Yeah.
These are just things that you'll see, and they're all like open source things that you can learn. Unfortunately, translating and like working with the law enforcement and stuff, these are things that I learned over the years that I was like, oh wow, like I did not know this. Let me take note of this. Because
Yeah,
I
it
Yeah,
seems like
I
it's a
wasn't even
whole,
thinking about that,
yeah,
to tell
it's
you the
like a whole
truth.
different language
Yeah, it's
that,
called code. It's called cryptic language or coded language. It's kind of like
Mhm.
back in the day when you had those decoder rings that meant something. We're doing it now, but with emojis.
Yeah,
That's all it is. You know,
yeah,
back in the day it was more complicated because when you're doing the coding stuff and cryptic languages, and you're trying to change it from a plain text to a ciphertext, which a plain text is I had lunch, and you want to change it so someone else can't read it. So you would change it in a decoder ring to say like numbers and letters, and then whoever had the key or the formula could know what you were trying to say. They're just
Yes.
doing
yeah,
it now with emojis, right?
yeah,
Which I also know how to do a little bit. Uh, so yeah, those are just things that you're trying to see, and unfortunately, it's so complex that each case, from my experience, brings its own set of rules and its own set of challenges because it's all going to depend on what the person utilizes.
yeah,
Uh,
Oh, yeah,
but
each
yeah,
situation is unique.
yeah.
Yes.
yeah, and
Well,
everybody, criminals are crafty, unfortunately.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's like every time I feel like every time law enforcement cracks the code, so to speak, then they're still like a step behind because the criminal aspect is like, oh God, they figured this out. So we're going to switch it up,
Well,
Yeah.
I look at it
and it's
like
You'll have
like,
this.
that.
yeah,
Yeah, I look at it like this. That person, they look at it, and this is why I say human traffickers are just trash and they're shit because they look at it as I now have to change my ability to make income so I don't get caught again.
yeah,
It's just the way
yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Cause I know like our apartment got broken into in Indy and I made the worst joke to the guy that came to process the scene because he was taking fingerprints and I kind of laughed and I was like, well, in CSI, they'd already know who did this. And he looked around, he's like, I fucking hate that show. Fucking
Yeah.
hate that show. And I'm like, ooh,
thank
made the
God
wrong
there's
comment.
no thank God that there's no show about interpreters and stuff. I don't think there is actually. Now that I think about it, I don't think
I
there's a
don't
show
know.
about interpreters doing stuff. If there was, they would have to show a good show about interpreters would have to show political interpreter, court interpreter, field interpreter, educational interpreter, medical interpreter, and like
Wait a
all
minute.
situations.
Gotcha.
Wasn't there a movie about an interpreter at the UN
There's a
that
new
overheard
one.
something?
The interpreter, the translator, the interpreter, I think it's called. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
back
Where
in the day,
she,
but that was the UN one, right? There's
yeah. Yeah.
another
Where she
one,
overheard some
but
political,
there's another one called the translator that it has subtitles, and it's
Okay.
this guy who speaks English, Spanish, and Russian, and he helps the Chernobyl kids that were sent from Russia to Cuba, and
Wow.
he's their interpreter, and
Interesting.
it's a it's so well done because as someone who's like had to interpret those things, and not the Chernobyl obviously, but as someone
Yeah.
who's had to deal with kids and like really fucked up situations, there's one point that he's like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to see these fucked up things, and the nurse says to him is like, but God put you here for a reason, so why not you? Because these kids don't understand that. So that's when I was like, oh shit, like that's how I used to feel, you know.
mm-hmm.
So it's a really well done movie. And then there's a movie called The Sound of Freedom that's out now, that it's Scott Valentine from Happy Days. He has a part of that. And I just scored a ticket to watch it. It's about a dude that was in the Air Force that he used to work human trafficking cases. He used to hunt the traffickers down. So that
Oh,
movie's out now. So Sound of Freedom which it talks about this too, man. Like it's yeah. Even
Yeah.
in modern day anime, like cartoons and stuff, they talk about child trafficking and stuff like that. People just don't make the connection, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I seriously, like I said, just even thinking about the scenarios going through your whole course, I'm like, I kudos to you for being able to do this. Because unfortunately, it's one of those things that somebody has to be able to do it. You know, somebody has to be able to speak up for, you know, the victims and be able to give them a voice, really. I mean,
Yes.
is what you're doing with being translating for them.
Yeah.
And I, like I said, major respect to you for doing that, all of this. um I personally, I, like I said, after going through everything, I'm like, I think almost anybody who would be interested in learning about this should probably take some sort of awareness course.
Yeah,
um
they should,
you know,
and
I'm
it
not
needs
saying
to
like
be.
everybody on the planet, but you know,
One could
if
hope.
you're in a situation, you know,
Yeah.
if you find yourself, like, if you're a traveler, if you travel a lot, flight attendants,
Yeah,
you know.
there was a recent company that I don't want to name that they tried to tell a passenger they thought that he was trafficking this girl, and there wasn't even like two of the probably 10 or 5 signs that you would normally find in a trafficking case. They weren't even there. And I don't know if the airline's getting sued, but I know the man made a statement and they haven't replied back to him last time I
Yeah,
heard.
I think
So
I'm
I
familiar
heard that,
with.
wasn't it?
Well, I'm familiar with. I'm pretty familiar. I'm pretty sure I'm familiar with
Yeah,
what you're talking about because the situation
mhm,
was that the little girl was white
mhm,
and or appeared white,
correct.
and the father was not exactly white,
Mhm.
and then you had two white flight attendants tried to say, "Oh, I think that little girl's not supposed to be with him," and said something like you said, but there wasn't any of the other indicators.
So
And
the little
that's
girl, to
yeah,
my understanding, had a laptop on her, had electronics with her, and spoke. And to my, from what I read, right? I don't know if this is true, but from what I read, if it's the same situation, I read that they also asked her who that was, and she answered perfectly. And then when they got out of the plane, they were talked to by police, and then they just left them there. Like they just left. Like this is what I
yeah,
read. So I was like,
uh-huh.
"Ooh, that's an iffy one, you know?" Because
yeah,
there's
Yeah,
air marshals in each
yeah,
plane. I know that. I know each plane has an air marshal, or should, or kind of sort of has an air marshal. Let's put it that way, you know? So I know those guys get extensive training on trafficking and on reading body language and
yeah,
all
mm-hmm.
these other things. So, you know, it's one of those things that it's like, yeah, you know, that could happen. Good on them for trying at least to do something. But that means that your training needs to be updated. Your
oh,
training needs,
definitely,
yeah, your training
definitely,
needs to be
Yeah,
updated, and your training should always be updated. Like my classes, none of my classes stay the same. As things evolve and I see new examples and I learn about new things and I can rectify them and the attorney checks them, then I always add them to the courses because it's ever changing. You know, some
yeah,
things are going to stay the
yeah,
same. You know, some core concepts and basics are going to stay the same, but you that's something that you should learn. That's something that everybody should learn from, you know, like, hey,
yeah,
where did we mess up here? Oh, and listen, you're not always going to catch them, man. Not always going to
no,
catch
no, yeah,
yeah,
you're gonna
yeah,
miss, unfortunately, you're gonna miss some, unfortunately.
yeah,
yeah. I have to deal with that all the time. It's like because I'm constantly assessing those situations, and sometimes I'm not going to know, and I just have to deal with that.
The best thing I tell people is to be friendly. Like the more friendly you are to everybody, like that's one of the
Oh,
things that I tell people who work in hotels is like the friendlier you are, the more opportunities you have, right? Because someone will feel comfortable enough. Because you have to understand, some of these kids, man, they're kept in like rooms and stuff, so they don't have much human interaction. right? So if they feel like a human interaction, that might be, and that's what happened in the case of my buddy, that he was able to call the cops and whatnot. But that's the thing, is like, just be, hey, how's it going? Do you need anything? Do you need anything? Oh, that's so pretty. Okay, you have a good day. And you never know, man. Might be, oh, maybe this person. Let me go to the bathroom. Let me get away. So there's like a lot of things that you can go over. Hey, is this person overly protective? No, 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 no. Go to the bathroom and I'll stay at the door. Or go. And the other thing is it might be like, I know dudes' wives that have social anxiety. Like we have a friend that, God bless his heart, his wife has social anxiety. So if she goes to the bathroom, he goes, with her and whatnot, because she asks him. So like, and obviously that's an extreme case,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
That definitely is
So like,
exception to the rule.
yeah. So like, that's why I say, like, there's always two extremes, but normally we're here, right? Normally.
Yeah.
So that's the thing to understand, man. And the most people that are probably going to run into it too are, like I said, flight attendants. That's like a level 3 for me. A level 1 and a level 2 would be hospitals, law enforcement, hotels, restaurant, and beauty and barbers. Those will be the people that I hope we could touch with this, because they're in the front lines, man. Everybody needs to get their hair cut. Everybody needs to get their nails, and everybody needs to get their feet done. Everybody wants to look good. Everybody has to eat. Everybody has to go somewhere to sleep.
Yeah.
So those are the key points right there. Those are the funnels where you're probably going to be able to catch traffickers more often than not. Churches too.
Yeah. Because I know my niece is a hairdresser, and I know, like, one of the things is somebody comes in to get their hair cut and the other person is saying, do their hair like this. We make it this color, make it this cut.
Yeah.
And not letting them have any kind of voice.
That's absolutely a sign. Yeah.
And and it's like,
but then again, here's another thing, right? And I learned this when I work with CPS, is there's parents who are like, you'll ask a question to the kid and they'll answer for the kid.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's a dangerous sign there, right?
Yeah.
Because psychologically that looks manipulative. Oh, but the kid's shy till they get to answer, because that just looks wrong to anybody. And I've seen it. I've seen it in court where it doesn't look well. So you'll see traffickers do that too. They'll answer for the person doesn't really have, and you'll ask the person, and the problem is some people are too scared to, because the thing is, that might also be an indication of domestic violence.
Exactly. Because I know, like with Maddie, anytime we go to the doctors, I let her answer as much as she can.
Yep.
So that I'm not constantly,
you can think, how to talk.
Yeah.
Like, you're safe. Yeah.
You know your name, your birth date, where you live. You can answer these questions.
I don't need to hold your hand for those things. And that brings a lot of, like, as former law enforcement too, like, that gives me like, oh, okay, that's one thing I don't have to worry about. Because I know that, he's not, it doesn't look, it's something to check off my mental list. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So it's just little things like that, man. And again, that could also mean maybe the person's autistic and they have extreme levels of anxiety. Maybe they have Asperger's. Like, there's a million things that could happen. But again, not all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you have that unique situation where it's like, that's just what they do or whatever. So
exigent circumstances, man. Shit happens.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you, like I said, I just going through your course, it's amazing. There's so much information. We're going to include, tell people, first of all, where they can find you if they want to
here's
hook up with your, it's time for plugging.
Tell us what's going on.
The podcast,
where else can we find you?
The whole line.
I'm pretty easy to find. I'm actually a lot more accessible than people think, because I do everything on a schedule. So you can find me on Richard Aviles at Facebook. You can find me on TikTok at Richard Aviles 52, I believe, which I'm trying to grow that because we have about like 6,000 followers right now and whatnot. At Richard Aviles 51, actually 51. Our podcast is the Rico Podcast. We've interviewed like a couple of domestic violence shelter people that I used to work with. We've interviewed a few people that I used to work trafficking cases with, or that have seen me in action. You can follow us on YouTube on the Rico Podcast, like and subscribe. And me personally, my course, you can take it at transinterpreting.com and just type in human trafficking, and it's the only course that pops up. It's
Okay.
$89
Okay.
and it's worth 3 CUs. So, and if you want to have me for a live event, you can find me on my email, RAB as in boy, D as in Delta, EL440@gmail.com. I'm pretty easy to find.
Okay.
Okay. Awesome. And yeah, like I said, I highly recommend it for people that are wanting to learn more.
Well, I'm definitely going to go over it again, especially with what I do, because I'm sure there's something I missed.
Yeah.
And if you have
and it's a good
questions, so
refresher. Yeah.
And if you have questions, just email me and call me, man. She has me on Facebook. I'll answer right away.
Yeah. So
Sweet.
Yeah, we seriously appreciate you taking this time because, for me, this is an important topic that needs to be talked about, that needs to get out there. That information needs to get out there to the public.
Yeah, well, we got fun and silly things, but we do need to and have this come on every once in a while to definitely keep it real.
Yeah, every once in a while you got to talk real stuff.
Yeah,
and yeah, we appreciate you coming on, taking the time. I seriously appreciate everything you do. Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll have to have you on for something fun sometime.
Yeah,
but
there you go.
Person.
Yeah. So, but yeah, thank you so much.
I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah. Okay, huge shout out to Richard for coming on again. Rico podcast. Check it out. We're going to include links down below for anybody that wants to check out his whole course that he teaches.
Yes.
Like I said, we love to have fun, but every once in a while you got to talk some serious stuff, and it's a serious subject. And we are so glad that he came on to talk about it.
Exactly. It's definitely something I encounter in my travels as far as like something I need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
If not more.
Exactly. But we will be back with fun stuff. We are going to be doing a couple of movie reviews coming up.
Maybe another local venue. We're gonna see if we can talk to her about that. That seems like a good thing.
We have
as much local as well.
Yeah.
Keep it local and movies and stuff, and just kind of see what's out there.
Yeah. So keep checking in and have a great day.